Hi, everyone. I am so excited to show you guys this interview. I was lucky enough to talk to Oscar nominated Emmy Award-winning costume designer Jean-Pierre Dorléac. He's been involved in so many big things. He did Somewhere in Time, Battlestar Galactica, the superhero suit from Greatest American Hero, and of course, my favorite show, Quantum Leap. I was even lucky enough, get this, guys, this pin right here, it was used in Quantum Leap. This is a screen use pin that Dean Stockwell wore in Quantum Leap. Can you believe it? He sent that to me. It's blows my mind. So I hope you guys enjoy this interview. Check him out on Twitter or his website. Check out his book. Just enjoy.
How are you, Allison?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And so excited to be talking to you.
I'm thrilled to be talking to you too.
Well, it means a great deal to me that there have been so many fans contacting me about Quantum Leap and their interest in my book, although the book ends before I started doing Quantum Leap. But the fact that they have shown so much interest in what it takes to actually do the work I do is thrilling, because it's one of the reasons I got into business was sort of under the educational auspices of what I do.
Well, I mean, without what you do, a lot of these shows, these movies, they wouldn't be half as good as they are. I mean, one of the reasons that I really love Quantum Leap was just the look of it.
Oh, thank you. I sure wish there were a lot more producers in this town who felt that way. You know, they have strikes here all the time with actors and writers and so forth, but the costume designers have never had a strike, and I always joke that if they did, then everybody would have to go naked on TV.
Well, and you can tell the difference between a show that has a costume designer like yourself, or something where they just get clothes off the rack, and it does look a lot cheaper.
That's called styling, which is a word that has taken place over the last decade that is an anathema to my ear, because it's people who really absolutely don't know anything. All they are is really dress agents. They go out and get clothes from distributors who want credit on the production, and there's very, very little selection, and a lot of the times the things you get are not actually very current. They're usually discards from last year's line that they want to get rid of. And I went through this on a TV series called Cover Up, in which I had models who were undercover spies, but every week they had to have 2 photo shoots within the episode, and some junior executive that had been hired on the film production, who knew zilch about anything, got some bug up his nose to contact some ready-to-wear designer in New York to send us clothes gratis, so that we could have a whole new line of clothes to show and give them credit. Well, these people knew nothing about TV, and we were shooting in Los Angeles in 107 degrees in the valley, and this idiot sends me wool suits trimmed in raccoon. Well, I'm going to tell you, I went through the roof. Plus the fact I kept asking for sizes over and over again to meet the sizes of the runway models, and they kept sending me, instead of 6s and 8s, they kept sending me 12s and 14s.
Oh gosh.
Garments that were so awful, ugly, wrong for the period, and wrong in size, and we ended up spending more money doing alterations to take them in so that they look presentable on camera than it would have been for me to make them. And finally somebody woke up to the fact and canceled the idea after me pulling my hair out for about 2 months. Anyway, that's what this part of this business is trying to resolve, altercations like that.
One of the things that really impresses me about the work that you do, it's not just about finding clothes that look good on people or making them. There's a knowledge there about history and the time period and what type of materials were used for it. And not just for time periods in the U.S., it's for periods all over the world, which is completely different depending on where it is. And I noticed a lot of that while reading your book.
Yeah, The Naked Truth. It covers all of that. I was very, very fortunate without actually knowing it that my formative years were spent all over the world growing up because my family was in, I guess you'd want to call it the ambassador business. It was, we traveled a great deal, and I was on 6 continents before I was even 15 years old. So I was able to see an awful lot that most people normally don't experience. And I had always been interested in clothes. It's a long, long story there. But I kept watch of everything, fabrics and designs and weaves and everything as I traveled from Japan to South America, all through Europe and so forth. And I used this knowledge, especially on Quantum Leap. Quantum Leap was probably had the biggest scope of anything I ever did because I covered from the late 40s all the way through the middle 50s, 80s. So I was covering 4 decades of costumes, and it wasn't just the year, it was also the location. I did 1957, I think, I don't know, 7 or 8 times in the show. But every time it was different because one time it was in the South, one time it was in New York, one time it was in California. And all of those places at that time had various trends and looks in their clothes that were important to, I think, bring to the public's attention correctly. I remember seeing a movie recently about San Francisco in 1978. And I was living in San Francisco for a short period of time then doing a play. And I knew what the people wore, and they had all these guys on Castro Street, and their shirts were outside of their jeans, which wasn't done in the 70s. You wore your T-shirts and your regular shirts inside your belt, inside your jeans. And wrong shoes and wrong ties and wrong collars on men's shirts, and it was embarrassing to watch because it was a poor representation of what things actually looked like in San Francisco in 1978. But then again, maybe because it was not that long ago, people are not disturbed by the fact that it may not be accurate, but it sure makes me angry when I see it.
A lot of people do notice when it isn't accurate, and I appreciate the details that you put into the work to make sure that it is accurate. There was one that was in the 3rd season, their first Christmas episode, A Little Miracle.
Right, where Al plays the ghost of Christmas future.
Yeah.
And this is a very interesting story. I think this costume is the only time that Dean ever came in for fitting in all the years that I worked with him. Dean was absolutely spoiled me to death as a costume designer because he was a wonderful, 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 bright, intelligent, charming person, honest, sincere, all the things that actors usually are. And when we first met, he said to me, Jean-Pierre, I hate costume fittings. I spent my whole life in front of the camera, and I had to put on so many costumes, and going to costume fitting just doesn't thrill me. And because I'm going to be working so many days on every episode, is there any way we can alleviate me having to be there unless it's absolutely necessary? And I said, oh yeah, that's real easy. We simply take your measurements. We have a dressmaker form made in your sizes, and I make clothes for you, and we'll send them to the set. we'll just sit here and talk about what you don't like, and I will never bring that in. And the only thing Dean really disliked was the color cerise. Other than that, he was up for anything. So when we did the Ghost of Christmas Future, he came in and I pulled a lot of clothes and a lot of junk, a lot of old chains from the jewelry collection, because we were at Universal and they had this huge box of broken jewelry, and in it were lots and lots of chains and junk and so forth. And we took him and we dressed him, and he actually stood there, and I took hot gun glue and glued things all over him. The chain, the cobweb shit on his hat. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say those things, on his hat. And all of that stuff was, the stuff that looked like spider web stuff was actually something that I can't even remember what it's called anymore, but it's a synthetic sheet of it's not material. Anyway, you use it between two pieces of fabric to laminate them together, but you can also put it on things and create this kind of, bizarre look with that creates as much heat as you put on it, the more you can pull it apart and spread it and so forth. And it ends up looking maybe a great deal like your lint paint, a portrait of Dean. which is one of your episodes I really watched. I watched several of them since I talked to you, including Santa Claus in Handcuffs.
Oh, gosh.
Directed by Ron Underwood that I knew nothing about, and I worked with Ron Underwood in Heart and Souls.
June Lockhart was also in that.
In what?
In Holiday in Handcuffs.
Oh, I didn't get that far into it.
Yeah, well, I just noticed from your book she was a friend of yours.
Her popcorn hair or something like that. I laughed so hard I fell off the sofa.
Oh gosh, thank you. That blows my mind that you watched anything of mine.
I love your comments, your commentary about the things that you're really dead on a lot of things and how you describe as what is going on, because it's so ridiculously silly. And I think you're very, very talented in that aspect.
Oh, thank you. Oh gosh, making me blush.
Let me tell you one other story. I didn't know June was in there, so I'll go back and look at it. I had no idea the film was even made. Like I said, I worked with Ron Underwood, and he certainly never mentions it, and I can understand why.
Well, apparently it's very popular on Lifetime, though, or ABC Family, I should say.
I guess so, during the holidays. Another story about Little Miracle that I'd love to tell is the Salvation Army uniform that the actress wears in it. And my closest friend ever in Hollywood was Gene Simmons. And if you remember correctly, Gene Simmons did a movie called Guys and Dolls, in which she was in the Salvation Army. She was Sister Sarah. And so when we got this episode, I was absolutely thrilled, because I had an opportunity to do a bit of an homage to Gene, with the costume being very, very similar to what Gene's was in Guys and Dolls.
Yeah, it looks great. One thing that I wanted to ask about in that episode, one of the guest stars was Charles Rocket, and he was also in another episode of Quantum Leap, and you worked with him in Tequila and Benetti, which is an obsession of me and my friends as well. Do you have any stories about working with him?
Oh, none other than I like Charlie, as I called him, very well. He was very tall, and I always got to dress him in very nice suits, especially in Tequila and Benetti. I got some really wonderful suits for him, and even made several. Charlie was a very quiet person, that's all I can tell you, and I was absolutely floored, and my jaw dropped to my chest when I heard how he left us. It was really sad. Apparently there was a lot more behind Charles than anybody actually saw. But as a person and as an actor, he was a wonderful actor, and I enjoyed him very much, and we had a great rapport when we saw each other. It's just sad, but once again, this business that everybody thinks is so wonderful and glamorous is also filled with potholes and many problems along the way, and it's very difficult to deal with a lot of this, especially if you don't have much background in the business. I grew up in the theater and with a family who was in the business, and I knew it before I was even 20 how insincere most people are in this business. We have a joke here that the leading actress who calls you darling and sweetie and honey and everything else immediately forgets your name 10 minutes after they call the martini shot. The martini shot is the last shot of the show, whether you're doing a movie or TV series or anything. I don't know where it was originated, but they always say this is the martini shot. And we always laugh and say that the leading actress can't even remember your name 10 minutes after the martini shot. And it's very true. It's a very it's a very phony business, and people are very insincere, and they use you as much as they possibly can. So I have a wonderful outlook on the business. I don't really take anything seriously, especially the acclaim that has come my way. It's just happened. I wasn't out for it.
I mean, you never know what things are like, behind the veneer in show business, and it's been great being able to talk with you. We talked a little bit before this interview, and you seem very sincere, and you talk like we're old friends, and that just means a lot.
There was a period in my life where I was not the costume designer, and I had an opportunity to take some courses in psychological analysis and profiling of people. And the fact that I moved around so much in my life, I have developed an sort of innate quality of being able to judge people an awful lot, not socially, but in my own mind, as to where they're coming from and how they are. And it's helped me out immensely in dealing with actors, especially. If you've read my book, Edith Ed says that this business is filled with the shallowest creatures in the world, and at the top of the list are actresses who should all be buried with a headstone that said, "This is as deep as she ever got." And it's a very funny saying, but it's also very, very true. And you just can't believe in this business. You really can't. And you can't really take it seriously, because you know what? This is not surgery. We're making a film, and that's it.
Yeah, well, I imagine you'd have to be able to deal with all sorts of people. I'm in the middle of reading your book right now, and I got to the part where you were meeting with Lana Turner. That was very interesting.
Liz Smith, the columnist, did a wonderful review on the book, and she headed it with, Lana Turner was not the pleasure of his company. Which is very true. She was a handful, to say the least. The book started, when I finished the book, it was 900 pages, and it's 400 pages now, so half of it was cut away. And the reason being is that a lot of it became repetitious. I told stories. I cut out one film entirely. I cut out about 5 films I actually did, because the problems and the situation were only repetitive of what I had already written about in the book. And I've been through a lot of very, very difficult people, and fortunately I've come out smelling like a rose, which is not easy to do. It's not easy to do.
Well, I was glad to hear from just from interviews that I've heard that it didn't seem like there was that kind of attitude on Quantum Leap.
No. Quantum Leap, we had... I tried to think the other day, did I ever have great difficulty on Quantum Leap? I remember one actress who I'm not going to mention, because nobody would know who she is anyway. She came from Andy Warhol's crowd back from the 60s. and she was to play this woman who sang at the church in the Americanization of Machiko before the wedding. And she was a huge woman. I mean, like the size of a refrigerator. And this was supposed to be, at the end of World War II when he came home in the 40s. So there was absolutely nothing in stock anywhere that would fit a woman her size. And that was because, whether people know it or not, men and women, everyone, at the turn of the 20th century, like 1900, 1910, 1912, 13, when I did Somewhere in Time, these women were all much smaller than women of today are. The average women's shoe size in 1912 was a size 6. Now it's like a size 9. And it's because of all the vitamins and all the stuff we eat. And it's also true of the girth and the height of people. Women are much taller now and much bigger. A size 2 was size 4 was like standard size at the turn of the century, and now it's size 12, I would think, what I see on the streets. So it's very difficult when you're doing period to go out and find stuff when you have larger people to dress. And so we had to make all of her clothes, and she had 2 scenes at the picnic and there, and she was so impossible and always late and constantly sweating like a big pig. And she gave me trouble, and I just kept my mouth shut and got her dress and sent it instead. But she couldn't keep it to just the dressing room. She was horrible on the set, and it got to the point that they fired her and cut her out of the film entirely.
Oh, wow.
So there's a good story for you.
I'd heard that you had trouble finding women's shoes that were in Scott Bakula's size.
Oh, of course. We did try. All of Scott's shoes were made.
Okay.
From the first episode, he played a woman, which I believe was What Price Gloria. And I had a red pair made, a black pair made, and a cream pair made. And I made them in a sort of a classic look, in a heel size that could pass for anything from the 30s through the 80s. And so actually Scott ended up wearing the same pair of shoes because they were very expensive. They were like $500 a pair to have them made from, because they weren't only just a shoe, they were also, the intersole was an iron plate to steady his heel, because when he was the streetwalker in that one episode on Red, he wore them there too, if I remember, with the black fishnet hose. And he had to walk around and, do a lot of stuff when he was playing a woman. So we had to really have very stable shoes. So not only were they steel enforced, but the soles of them all had dance rubber on them so he wouldn't slip. So these shoes cost a great deal of money, and when we had 3 pair made, that's close to $2,000 with taxes and everything. And so we utilized them throughout, so we didn't. When I knew he was playing a woman in heels, I kind of dressed him in clothes that would match the colors of the shoes we already had, or design clothes for him, and to that effect. You also had mentioned to me that you wanted to talk about Miss Deep South when he wore the red shoes, especially in the bathing suit contest scene, which was a very funny scene. We had to find all those bathing suits too, which was very, very hard to come by, because this was the 50s, and bathing suits that had the panel across the lower portion of the woman's torso were not made after that time. But I happen to have known the actress Esther Williams. And Esther Williams, who was known for her bathing beauty movies that she did, had put out a line of 50s bathing suits at the time I was doing this. So I was able to go down to her showroom downtown and actually pull bathing suits that were very, very close to what they look like in the 50s, and then bring them back to Universal and actually find them in the sizes of the extra models we were going to use, and then redo them so that one of the girls had a blue bathing suit that had a white stars and a white band across the top and on the side. All of that was added, just as Scott's bathing suit was added of a little sort of skirt with a band across the bottom of it that was very prevalent of the time that women wore those things. And we did that because, of course, just the panel across the front of Scott would not have been sufficient to disguise him as a woman.
Yeah, I thought that was very clever with the skirt.
So that's how, people are always curious as to how we do come up with the costumes and everything. This was a huge show for Scott and for me because I had, I think, 8 changes for him in it, including the infamous Quanta La Gusta Carmen Miranda outfit that was also totally made from scratch up, and Al's shirt was fabric was found to complement the costume so that when he and Al were together, it looked like it was a double act, and they were costumed together, where in fact they really weren't. It was just me having fun and carrying the colors through. The Quanta Lagusta costume is one of the costumes I kept because it was so unique. But as you may or may not know, starting way long time ago, when I was quite young, I started collecting clothes, vintage things. I was given things by Simone Signoret, a very well-known French actress who won the Academy Award for Room at the Top. And she gave me a wonderful Jean Lavin tea gown from 1921 that was the original runway model of the winter showing. And I never used it. And so recently I went through my collection of over 25,000 pieces of vintage clothing, and I sold off $1 million worth of it, and then I separated the better things and gave them to the museum. And I gave the pink, watermelon pink Jean Lavin to the Los Angeles County Museum, and through it and several other pieces I've given them. I will be speaking at the Los Angeles County Museum on March 5th with the Costume Council about the process of creating and actually bringing forth the costumes that you have designed. So I'm very honored that that's going to happen. And I'm really pleased that people are wanting to collect my things. The other things that I have from Quantum Leap and stuff, I am trying to sell off to good homes, and Quanta Lagusta is one of them.
Are these things that you're selling online, or you're selling them locally, or?
No, I'm selling them. People can contact me through either Twitter or through my website if they're interested, and I will give them a price of what they generally run. I had one online the other day that somebody put up that was Dean's costume that was all in sort of a deep wine color red that he wore in 2 episodes, which I can't remember. There were so many, but they identified it. And they also had gotten the price from somewhere else where I'd mentioned it, and it's like $6,500. And for the fans who are interested, these are not marked up prices. Actually, these are the prices of what they cost to make this garment back in 1989 and 1990. I'm selling them for what they were because I have way over 100 full ensembles from Quantum Leap, and not just Dean's and Scott's things. I have a lot of the women's things that were really, really wonderful, like the red tango dress and all of the black things that Claudia Christian wore in Play It Again, Sam, where she was the widow who said, "Oh, I can't. Can I help it that I look so good in black?"
Well, she did look great.
She was the greatest. One of the great. We had great guest stars on Quantum Leap, and Nancy Stafford, who was in Mystique South, who played the convention chairwoman. Nancy and I worked together for a whole season on Matlock. She came in after Linda Pearl left. And I adored Nancy. Nancy was the nicest, sweetest, most wonderful girl. She'd been Miss Florida, and she comes from Fort Myer. And I can't say enough about Nancy. She was heaven to work with, and she and Scott worked together on Matlock. That was the episode that's where I first met Scott. He was on Matlock with her. So when we came time to do Quantum Leap and we did Mystique South, I said to Scott, "Don't you think it would be a great idea to get Nancy to guest star as the convention hostess?" And he goes, "Jean-Pierre, you're just a genius." And that's how Nancy got the part.
Well, that's great. Another episode I wanted to talk about was Catch a Falling Star, which was the Man of La Mancha episode.
Oh, right. Yes, I always call it Man of La Mancha. That was another big show to do, having to do a whole Broadway show within our show during its big time. Oh, I have a wonderful story to tell you about this that I've never been able to tell before. The makeup woman who's at the beginning of the show where she's putting the mustache on Sam before he goes on stage as the stand-in for John Cullum, who was playing Cervantes. We were in a fitting, and I wanted to make her look eccentric because most makeup ladies have a tendency to look that way. And she had her feet were a little bit larger than normal, let's put it that way. And the outfit I put on her, I wanted her in sort of like a boot with a heel. And I remember some that I had, and they were in storage. So we fit her, and then she came back another day to do the final fitting, because sometimes I do that. I have a fitting to get things more or less organized and do pinnings, and especially when I'm MOing something. MO means made to order. That's making it originally. So I went and got these boots that had been stored somewhere for years and brought them in and left them in the box in front of the mirror, and she showed up and she had them on. And I thought, "Oh, great, they look fabulous, don't they?" She says, "Yeah, they do, and I'm so thrilled because I know you wanted to make me higher, but I didn't know it included this." And she pulls forth this canister, this like a small mason jar, and it's filled with marijuana.
What?
I had been growing marijuana in my yard at the last time I had used the boots, and had harvested it, put it in this bottle, and hid it in these boots, and forgotten all about it. I can only tell this story now because marijuana is legal in Los Angeles, so nobody can arrest me. But this was the funniest story ever. She says, "Is this for me too?"
Oh, that's so great.
Catch a Falling Star was a wonderful show. In it was also Janine Turner, who I then later did Leave It to Beaver with, and John Cullum, who was a wonderful Broadway actor who was a wonderful film actor and just a very, very lovely person. And he actually came back and directed a Quantum Leap. So it was Catch a Falling Star was really a wonderful episode to do. I am still moved very deeply at the end of it when Sam sings, when Scott sings. And I'm sure all the fans know this, but Scott was a very, very gifted actor. He did the majority of his stunts, all of his dancing, all of his singing, all of his horseback riding, all of the piano playing was really Scott. he came from a background of theater and had worked on Broadway, and as a result was accomplished in all of these aspects, and because of it added a great deal to the series as a whole.
Yeah, he's great, especially the singing in that episode. That's not a small undertaking, Man of La Mancha.
No, not at all.
And you had to do a ton of costumes for that. I mean, doing that whole play.
Well, his costume was actually built 3 times. One for John Cullum, and they were all identical, and one for him, and then one for his Scott stunt double, whose name was
Is it Diamond Farnsworth?
Diamond Farnsworth. I was going to say Richard. Richard was his father, the actor. Diamond was, I worked with Diamond for many, many years. Diamond was on Tales of the Gold Monkey and everything that Don Belisario, the producer of Quantum Leap, had done. Diamond was the stuntman, and Diamond and I got to know each other very well because he was always coming in and I was having to pull together costumes for him that either were actually MO'd for him or were duplicates we pulled for him that were from stock that were so close to Scott's clothes, a costume, that for the quick action that was seen on the screen, you couldn't tell the minute differences. But whether people know this or not, there are a lot of things that go into costume design other than just designing it. If I have something that involves a stunt, I have to find out how many takes they're going to do on the stunt before I can decide about how many articles of clothing I have to make, and then I have to go out and find that much yardage, and that is the biggest problem of all, because sometimes when you're looking for 20 to 30 yards of fabric, it's almost impossible to find. You spend the day going through things thinking you have found exactly what you're looking for, and they can't get any more yardage. So there's a lot of hang-ups to just designing, especially a series, because whether you know it or not, that we did these shows which were equivalent to a movie, more or less to say, and we did them every 8 days. So the minute we started shooting one, I was prepping another. I was reading a script and breaking it down and putting ideas together and going to production meetings and getting things approved as soon as possible. Fortunately, one of the wonderful things about Quantum Leap was that Don Belisario had an open door policy, and I could pick up the phone and call him directly and then get an answer to things immediately, where this is very, very unusual. Glenn Larson, who I did all of the other series I did with, like Quantum Leap, Battlestar Galactica and Airwolf, and
You did Manimal with him too, didn't you?
Manimal, yeah, all of those. I worked for Glenn 14 years, and then I worked for Don Belisario for about 12 years. And they both had the open door policy, which made my life really, really easy. And there was only 1 or 2 occasions that I ever had any question about what I was doing. I really had a carte blanche and I showed a lot of sketches at production meetings, and they were just pencil sketches, but they were full sketches like my sketches are, detailed. And I would say, this is what it's going to be, and it's going to be in red, and this is everything. And they go, oh, that's great, Jean-Pierre. And I'd go, the only problem I ever had was when we did the episode about Al coming back from World War II, and he takes Scott's place, and Scott becomes the hologram. And I don't remember the story. All I remember is that he comes back in a small town in 1945, and he's walking down the street, and Don wanted a girl, a blonde, in a red sweater and shorts, walking down the street, because Dean hadn't seen women in years because he had been to war. So I thought, oh, this is going to be impossible. First of all, it's summertime. Women don't wear sweaters in summer. So I found a knit sweater with a scoop neckline that was in coral, and actual shorts from the late 40s, and the right shoes and everything, and a bag and everything and put a scarf around her ponytail in the back, around her head. And she was dressed and looked really great, and we got in front of the camera, and Don was there and said, I told you I wanted her in shorts, not Bermuda shorts. I said, Don, this is 1945. This is a small town in the middle of the United States. If her shorts were any shorter at the time, the church people of the town would stone her to the death. And I said, you can't have any shorter. Those are the actual shorts of the period. He said, Jean-Pierre, don't argue with me. It's my money. I want them short. And he went to the wardrobe lady and took a pair of scissors and cut the woman's shorts off on the screen. I was not happy. He was not happy when he found out he had to pay $500 for a replacement of the shorts. But then again, that's how the business goes. And as I've always said to everybody who asks me, what was my favorite costume? I don't have a favorite costume because I never get married to the schmatas, meaning I don't fall in love with the clothes because anything can happen to them and they're not mine except for the ones I get in my contracts.
Mm.
Which leads us to my favorite episode that you wanted to talk about, Sea Bride. And that was actually written for me because I crabbed one time in a production meeting that I was tired of doing people on deserted islands or in elevators or in scrubby old clothes, and I wanted a show that had some glamour to it, and they turned around and gave me more than I ever anticipated. But this was a very special show of mine. I was nominated for an Emmy for this, as well as for Oswald and for the ones where they played the rock stars. I can't remember the name of that episode.
Glitter Rock.
Glitter Rock, and A Single Drop of Rain, which was the 40s, which are all favorite shows of mine. But this was my very favorite show. One, because wonderful, wonderful actress Beverly Leach played the lead in it. And she was just heaven to work with. I mean, I could have taken a yard of fabric, stood 20 feet away from her and thrown it in the air and draped it on her, and she would have looked like $1 million. That's how fun and wonderful Beverly was, and how beautiful she was. She was probably, of all the major actresses I've worked with, she was by far, I always felt, one of the most beautiful. She had just heavenly beautiful skin and a sweet, sweet disposition.
She looked great in that episode. The tango dress was just gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that may be one of my very favorite dresses.
No favorites except for the favorites.
Here's a story, though, that I'll tell you about costumes and so forth. I didn't own the wedding dress. The tango dress was in my contract, but not the wedding dress. And the wedding dress, I might as well tell the whole story about how I designed. When I got the script, I was so elated with it. I came home that night from the studio, and I got stoned, and I sat down, and I went through a couple books of mine, especially Dior in the 50s, and I found that Dior had actually designed a wedding dress at the time built on a panier, which is the under hoop that is for dresses during the 1700s, like 1700 through 1780. It was what Marie Antoinette wore, and all those women, all the things like I did for the Bastard and the Rebels. It stood out on the side. It's called a panier because it's like a loaf of bread. The panier means like French bread, a look of a French bread in French. And so it was the hoop is flat in the front and back and just on the sides. And I had used it in the Bastard and in the Rebels, and I loved the look that it created. So when I saw this at DR, this is how I came up with the idea for the wedding dress in Sea Bride. So years later, after Quantum Leap folded, the wedding dress had been put into universal stock. I got a telephone call from the Television Academy, and they wanted to do a exhibit of wedding dresses used in television series, and could they show my wedding dress from Quantum Leap. So they called Universal, and Universal gave me permission to go and get it. And I went to get it, and I went and put it on a dressmaker form with a pannier. And during the time it had been in stock, it had been rented by various stylists, my favorite person, who know nothing. And they looked at it and goes, oh, they put the dress without the pannier on a dressmaker form and goes, oh, look, it's longer on the sides. I wonder why. Well, we'll just cut that off.
Aww.
And they took scissors and they cut over 4 inches off the hem of the dress on both sides. They didn't let the hem down and cut it. They just cut through the hem and left this dress. Apparently they thought it was supposed to be on a hoop skirt, being as dumb as most stylists are. And they absolutely, totally, completely ruined the dress forever. Because when you put it on the dressmaker form with the pannier underneath it like it was originally made, the hem of the dress smiled at the bottom. It went from one side down to the floor, up to the other side. I was never more furious in my life about them ruining this $8,000 beaded wedding dress that was so special. But I had no control of it, because that's what happens when you're a costume designer. And that's why in my book, Edith Head gave me the best advice ever and said, have 6 to 7 of your costumes in your contract that you get to keep them when it show's over with. And I said, for what? And she said, for displays in the future. And I went, who's ever going to display my stuff? But I took her advice and I did it, and I'm sure glad I did, because I've gone back to look for things of mine that I left in various studios, and they're either destroyed or ruined or stolen. And it's very disheartening to see costumes treated the way they are. But that there is not much respect for what we do in this business. I told you how most costumers forget, how most leading actresses forget your name after the martini call. Well, sometimes you're even lucky that they even remember who you are when you're working with them, because they call you, the wardrobe boy, or the dresser, or the boy with the clothes, or the stylist. They don't take any consideration that you're a costume designer, and for the majority of them treat you like you're a person who brings their clothes to them and dresses them like you're a slave in the South. And there's not much respect for what we do. People think it's so glamorous. I have news for you. It is not a glamorous occupation. It's a very stressful occupation, and you have to deal with a lot of personalities. I wanted to tell all this in the book because I wanted people to be more aware of the differentiation between costume designers and couture designers and ready-to-wear designers and wardrobe people and dresses and so forth, because there is a major distinction. It's like calling a chef the dishwasher. And people should know that, I feel, because it would possibly help Hollywood in understanding that what we're doing is just as important as if we were an artist painting a picture. But as I told you, when in my book there's a whole chapter devoted to when I went looking for 1,700 clothes, and there were absolutely none left in this town, and my one last hope was going to Warner Brothers, who claimed to have had a whole warehouse filled. They did. They had a huge warehouse that was something like over 25 feet high, that had huge ladders that you had to climb to the stacks at the top to even pull anything down. But the whole roof of the warehouse had been glass, and it had been broken over the years, and rain and dirt and soot and sunshine had shined down on these costumes from the 1920s that Warner Brothers had stored, and it had rotted them. They were all on wooden hangers, and they all hung, rotted and shredded and bleached and stained with rain. Millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of beautiful, gorgeously gold embroidered coats from 1780 and things like that that Tyrone Power wore. Nobody cares. Nobody ever cared about the costumes or what anybody did in this town. And as a result of it, there is nothing left. Warner Brothers finally got rid of all that stuff. They burned it. They took it out and burned it because there was nothing they could do. They couldn't repair it. 20th Century Fox sold off everything. MGM sold off everything. There's only 2 actual studios with costumes left in the town anymore, and that's Universal and Disney. So that's what's happened to the business. It's gone from glamour to ready to wear, and it's a sad situation. But then again, people don't seem to be terribly interested in whether they're getting the real thing or not anyway.
It really is an art form, and it's a shame they didn't preserve those costumes better.
Well, that's why I keep fighting for the cause.
One thing I wanted to talk about when we were talking about Seabride, one of the story elements of that was an environmental message with the trash chute in it.
Yes.
And you had mentioned that you were really into environmental issues and...
I'm into animal protection and rehabilitation of wild cats, particularly. I have had for all my life a fascination for hybrid cats, like hybrid leopards. I own 3. And I support a cause for Citizens for Los Angeles Wildlife for the protection and care of a wild cougar, P22, that is in all the news out here on the West Coast. And I happen to live in the Hollywood Hills, and in 1912, P22 came onto my property and killed a fawn. And I have tried to support the animal for years. He came down with mange, and they had to tranquilize him and catch him and treat him for that. And through that, I developed even further support for animals that are poached by traffickers in South America. I'm talking about the pumas, the jaguars, the ocelots, the margays, the oncillas. These are all beautiful animals that they capture either for pet trade or still for the fur trade, which is absolutely heartbreaking to think that they kill these gorgeous, beautiful animals for somebody to wear. I can't fathom that. I have refused my entire career to use real fur unless it's fur that is from the period it came from. I use furs from the 30s, but they cannot be real ones. And when I did Buck Rogers in the 25th century, I had a character named Tiger Man, and they wanted me to make his costume out of a tiger pelt, and I absolutely refused, hands down. I said, no way, Jose. And I went downtown and I bought a cow hide that was tan, and I brought it back to the studio, and I actually painted it an orange color with dye, and then took magic markers and spent hours one night putting in black stripes so that they could cut the fabric and make it into an outfit that looked like actual tiger skin the next day for the guy to wear. And people to this day write me and say, how dare you have killed the tiger for that costume? And it wasn't. It was just an old cow that they'd already killed for meat. So, and I wish everybody else in the world would take into consideration that animals have just as much important place in our life as another person does.
Yeah, I totally agree. Animals have just as much of a right to be here as we do.
Actually, even more so, considering they were probably here before us.
You mentioned that you had some hybrid cats. I have a cat of my own. She's not a hybrid, but...
The hybrids talk a great deal. That's one of the things I'm fascinated by. You actually sit there and talk to them, and they answer you back. They're even more vocal than Siamese cats are, which I always thought were very vocal. But I have a Bengal, a Serengeti, and a new breed called an Oncina, which is a cross between a black leopard and a black domestic cat, and they all get along together very, very well. But when they get mad and hiss and carry on in their play, it's really a lot of noise.
I love vocal cats. Is there any other things that you wanted to promote or plug or leave people with?
No. I like I said at the beginning, I'm just very, very grateful that people are so interested in a quantum leap, especially because this has something that's been actually only developed in the last, I would say, 10 years. Prior to this, most of my fans were based from Battlestar Galactica and Somewhere in Time. Somewhere in Time has a huge following of people that get together every year in October and go back to the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island where the film was shot, and they reenact the movie to the point of having the ballroom scene where everybody dresses in 1913 costumes, and a lot of them emulate the costumes I designed for the characters in the film. It's very rewarding to find people are that interested in the things you've done. I'm fascinated. I have been to several science fiction conventions, and they usually have costume parades, and it's fun to see what somebody's interpretation of something I have made comes out looking. And some of them come out really spot on, but it's fun. I went to a convention one time and saw somebody actually went to all the trouble to try to duplicate Princess Ardala's costume from Buck Rogers in the 25th century, which was a very involved, detailed, and expensive costumes. But it's flattering to have somebody do those things. So to have this interest in Quantum Leap and all the people that have come my way, especially thanks to you, Allison, mentioning Quantum Leap and the Greatest American Hero in your Twitter, in your tweets. My following has really developed a great deal, and that is just great for me because I'm coming out with a new novel, not another memoir, and there will be no sequel to The Naked Truth because I've covered what I wanted to say. I did not write the book as a tell-all or anything about me. I couldn't imagine anybody sitting down for more than 2 minutes to really want to read about what my life has been like. I wanted to write about the business and what it entails and so forth, and I've covered that. So my work from here on out is probably strictly going to be fiction. And I've written a new novel called All There Is and Then Some. And it's quite a wonderful mystery novel. It's about a resort called Le Bay des Rêves, the Bay of Dreams, which is on the island of Martinique in the Lesser Antilles Islands of the Caribbean. And it's known for the pillage of gold and treasures items that were pulled from its shallow seafloor, left by the pirates of yesterday who had once taken refuge there. But I'm reading now, but today a killer lurks in the exotic tropical setting of the exclusive private resort, slowly picking off its staff of handsome young men, and no one has any notion of who it could be or why it is happening. Mystery, intrigue, sex trafficking, illegal drugs, stolen contraband, death, and all there is and then some transpire before a complicity to undo all of what the hotel stands for is unraveled. I've had great feedback on the people who've read it, and I'm really anxious for it to come out. So keep your eyes open for it. I don't know when it will be on the stands, but I will certainly advertise it on Twitter.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out when it comes out. It sounds really exciting.
Well, if you like mystery, intriguing novels, this is filled with people with the whole thing. All there is and then some.
Awesome. Well, I'll put the link to your website and to your Twitter and to where people can find you in the description of the video. And if anyone's watching this is interested, go ahead and check that stuff out. And they can find your book on Amazon.com.
Yes, it's Amazon.com, or you can buy a signed copy on my website. They send them to me, and then I personally will autograph it for you. And it's also available through bookstores if you want to order it, but it takes a lot more time than Amazon.com does.
All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today. And
Allison, the thanks is mine for having me chat with you. It's been so much fun. I really was taken by your work, and I was very honored when you would like to have included me in your show. I can't thank you enough, and I hope you continue to have a wonderful success with it.
Well, thank you so much.
You take care now.
You too.
Stay warm in Chicago.
I will.
Bye-bye.
Bye.